Something just shifted with the San Francisco 49ers, and if you've been following this team closely, you can feel it. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not one of those headline-grabbing blockbuster moves that breaks the internet in 5 minutes. This is different. This is the kind of shift that sneaks up on you, and then suddenly changes everything about how you view this team going forward. Because for the first time in what feels like forever, the 49ers might actually be ready to do something fans have been begging for, not hoping for, not dreaming about, begging for. And it all starts with what Nick Wagner reported. The idea that the 49ers don't have major contract chaos hanging over them right now is already unusual. That alone tells you this offseason has been handled differently. But then comes the real twist. The one domino still sitting there is Trent Williams, and once that situation gets resolved, the door swings wide open for something we almost never see from this front office, investing early in the offensive line. Let that sink in for a second. And just when you think maybe that's speculation, maybe that's just off-season chatter, Matt Maiocco comes in and pours gasoline on it. Now we're hearing the 49ers would love to land a day one starting guard in the draft. That's not a depth move. That's not a let's develop this guy over time pick. That's a statement. That's the kind of move that says, we know exactly what our weakness is, and we're done pretending. It's not a problem. So let me ask you straight up, because this is where it gets interesting. Do you actually trust the 49ers to follow through on this? Like really follow through, not talk about it, not get linked to offensive linemen in mock drafts like every single year, but actually pull the trigger early? Because if you've been watching this team, you already know the pattern. Every offseason, there's buzz. Every offseason, there's logic behind fixing the line. And then draft night comes, and the Niners go in a completely different direction. But this time feels different. And here's why. You can't even consider making a move like this unless you've already handled business everywhere else. You don't prioritize the offensive line early unless your roster is stable enough to afford it. And quietly, that's exactly what this front office has done. They've put themselves in a position where they're not drafting out of desperation. They're drafting with intention. And that's dangerous in a good way. Because now, instead of plugging holes, you're building strength. Instead of reacting, you're planning ahead. Not just for this season, but for what happens after Trent Williams eventually steps away, and if that's really the mindset shift happening here. If the 49ers are finally thinking long-term about protecting their quarterback instead of patching things together, then yeah, things just got very interesting. And here's the part you can't ignore. This entire conversation, it's not really about the offensive line. It's about what happens next because of it. It's about unlocking something bigger, something that's already starting to gain serious attention across the league. So now I've got to ask you this before we go further. Are you all in on the idea of drafting an offensive lineman early, or does part of you still want that flashy skill player instead? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this, because the fan base feels split even if the momentum is building. And if you're enjoying this breakdown and you've been waiting for the Niners to finally make a move like this is exactly the kind of content we're building this channel around. Real conversations, real analysis, no fluff, so make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because we're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers and you're a huge part of that journey. Now here's where this gets even more fascinating, because while the 49ers are potentially fixing one of their biggest weaknesses, the rest of the league is starting to realize something about their quarterback. And the noise around him? It's getting louder. The conversation around Brock Purdy is starting to change, and you can feel it building like pressure before a storm. Not just from fans, not just from local media, from people around the league who don't hand out praise unless it's earned. And that's when you know something real is happening. Because when Albert Breer gets asked whether Purdy can realistically be an MVP candidate again, that question alone tells you everything. Nobody is asking that about a system quarterback. Nobody is throwing around MVP conversations unless there's something deeper going on. Now sure, Breer didn't go all in and say it's guaranteed. He pointed out the obvious. There are variables. Health matters. The roster has to hold up. The offense has to click. But he didn't shut it down either. He said it's not unattainable. And that word matters because not unattainable, is a long way from where Purdy was just a short time ago. We're talking about a guy who wasn't even supposed to be the future. A guy who walked into the league with questions stacked on top of questions. Arm strength, size, ceiling, all the usual boxes people love to check. But here's the funny thing, none of those boxes ever measured what actually makes him dangerous, and that's where the real praise starts coming in. When Jim Harbaugh calls him a winner, that's not just a compliment, that's a stamp. Harbaugh has been around elite quarterbacks, he knows what separates good from great, and he didn't hesitate. Then you've got Robert Saleh going deeper, talking about the way Purdy layers the ball, how he moves within the pocket, how he handles chaos when plays break down. That off-schedule ability, that calm presence when everything around him starts collapsing, that's not something you can fake. That's instinct, that's feel, and honestly, that's the kind of thing people overlooked when he came into the league. Nobody was talking about his leadership. Nobody was talking about how he commands a huddle or how teammates respond to him. Those are the invisible threads that hold an offense together, and Purdy has been weaving them since day one. So now the question shifts. It's no longer, is Brock Purdy good enough? It becomes, how good can he actually be? And that's where this entire offensive line conversation loops back in. Because if you give a quarterback like this just a little more time, just a little more consistency and protection, things can escalate quickly. But let's be real for a second. Do you already see him as elite? Or are you still waiting for that one season that removes all doubt? I want a yes or no from you on this. No middle ground. Is Brock Purdy already elite? Because the answer to that question shapes how you see everything else the 49ers are doing right now. And here's the part that makes this even more intriguing. It's not just about Purdy improving on his own, it's about what's happening around him. Because while everyone's been focused on contracts, rumors, and draft strategy, the 49ers have quietly been reshaping something else. Something that looks very different from just a couple of seasons ago. And once you see it side by side, you start to realize this offense isn't just evolving, it's transforming. If you blinked, you might have missed it. That's how quietly this transformation has happened. But when you step back and really look at it, this 49ers offense doesn't resemble what it used to be. Not completely. A couple of seasons ago, you were looking at a trio that felt locked in for years. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Jawan Jennings. That group had identity. It had chemistry. It had that unpredictable, do-anything energy that made defenses uncomfortable. And now, everything feels recalibrated. Because instead of that trio, you're now looking at a completely different mix. Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, and Ricky Pearsall. That's not just a swap, that's a philosophical shift. You've gone from versatility and chaos to structure, experience, and precision. Evans brings something the 49ers haven't really had in a while. A true, consistent, high-level veteran presence on the outside. A player who doesn't just produce, but stabilizes everything around him. There's a gravitational pull to his game. Defenses have to account for him every snap, and that opens doors for everyone else. Kirk adds a different flavor. Clean routes, reliability, a player who understands spacing and timing. The kind of receiver who becomes a quarterback's safety net without needing the spotlight. And then there's Pearsall, who feels like the bridge between eras. Young, explosive, still developing, but already showing flashes that make you think he could become something serious if given the opportunity. So now the question becomes, what does this group actually do for Brock Purdy? Because this isn't just about replacing names, it's about fit. And if you think about it, this new setup might actually align better with how Purdy plays the game. Quick decisions, timing routes, trusting receivers to be where they're supposed to be, letting the offense flow instead of forcing it. That doesn't mean the old group wasn't talented. It absolutely was. But sometimes talent alone doesn't create the cleanest system. Sometimes it's about how the pieces connect. And this version of the 49ers offense, it feels like it's being built with intention. Not just to be dangerous, but to be efficient. So let me throw this one to you because this is where opinions start to split. Which group do you trust more? The old trio with Deebo, Ayuk, and Jennings, or this new version with Evans, Kirk, and Pearsall? There's no easy answer there, and honestly, That's what makes it fun. But here's where things take another turn, because as exciting as this evolution is, there's still one piece of the puzzle that can either elevate everything or quietly hold it back, and you already know what it is. So before we get into that final piece, quick timeout, because if you're part of the faithful, this is for you. Listen, if you've been riding with this channel, if you're here breaking down every move, every rumor, every shift with us, you're not just watching, you're part of this. We're building something real here, and we're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers together. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. And if you want to take it a step further, you can hit that super thanks or the hype button. Not as a donation, but as fuel. Fuel for this channel, fuel for better content, and fuel for the quest for the next Super Bowl trophy. Every bit of support goes right back into making this bigger and better for the faithful. Now, let's talk about the one thing that could decide how far this team actually goes. Everything we just talked about, all the excitement, all the upgrades, all the momentum, it all runs through one final checkpoint. And it's the one area this team has danced around for years, the offensive line. You can build the perfect skill group. You can have a quarterback gaining league-wide respect. You can win the offseason on paper. But if the protection isn't there when it matters most, the whole thing starts to wobble. And the 49ers know it. That's why this shift we talked about earlier matters so much, because for once, it feels like they're not just aware of the issue, it feels like they're ready to attack it. Now, it starts with Trent Williams, the cornerstone, the anchor, still playing at an elite level. But let's be honest, you can't build a long-term plan around hope he keeps doing this forever. At some point, you have to prepare for what comes next. And even right now, there are cracks. The interior has been inconsistent. The left guard spot has been a revolving door. You've seen flashes from guys like Dominic Puni, who looks like he could be a real piece moving forward. You've gotten solid moments from Colton McKivitz on the outside. But solid moments isn't the same as stability. And here's the part that should make you pause. For a while now, the 49ers have been able to get away with it. Why? Because Brock Purdy can escape. He can extend plays. He can turn what looks like a sack into something positive. But that's not a foundation. That's a safety net. And building an offense that relies on your quarterback constantly bailing you out, that's a risky game. It works until it doesn't. You've already seen what happens when pressure ramps up. When defenses collapse the pocket quickly, it doesn't matter how good your weapons are. The timing breaks. The rhythm disappears. Everything tightens up. That's why this potential move in the draft feels different. If the 49ers actually go out and draft a day one starting guard, not a project, not a backup plan, but a true plug-and-play starter, you're suddenly looking at a completely different offensive ceiling. Now imagine it. Trent Williams locking down one side, a real upgrade at left guard. Booney continuing to develop. Stability across the interior. Tackles holding their own on the edges. That's not just improvement. That's protection you can trust. And when a quarterback like Brock Purdy trusts his protection, that's when things start to open up in a big way. That's when timing sharpens. That's when reads get cleaner. That's when the offense stops surviving and starts dictating. So here's the big question to close this out, and I want you to be honest about it. If the 49ers are on the clock and the right guard is there, a guy who can start immediately, do you take him? Yes or no? No overthinking. No, it depends. Would you spend that premium pick on fixing this once and for all? Because 72% of fans are already saying it's about time. And if the front office is thinking the same way, then this isn't just another off-season. Storyline, this is the move that could define the season. And maybe, just maybe, the move that pushes this team all the way back to where it wants to be. Now let me know what you want next.